Well, this looks good right now. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this special Lunch with the Friends program today. I'm Chris Knopp, Executive Director of Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness, and I'm joining you today from Ely. We have a very exciting, important, and timely program on the current status of fires in the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness and the other areas of the Superior National Forest. We have a great panel today. We have Clare Shirley, the owner and operator of Sawbill Canoe Outfitters. We have Ann Schwaller, the program manager for the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in the Superior National Forest. We have Joanna Gilkeson, the public affairs specialist for the Superior National Forest. And we have Clark McCreedy, who's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but he's on special deployment with the Eastern Area Type 2 Incident Fire Management Team, and he'll explain what a Type 2 management team is as part of the program here. I also want to thank the whole team at the Superior National Forest, Connie Cummings, the supervisor, and everyone else at the Superior National Forest for all the hard work they've been doing these last several months here to make the wilderness such a welcoming place for all of us. And I also want to thank my colleagues at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. It's a really busy time for us. We're at the State Fair right now. We've done a lot of work to be present there, and I'm grateful for for our team doing the work for that. And we have an annual dinner called our annual gathering coming up in October, and we're hard at work on that. And we're working on important policy programs and education programs as well. So I want to thank the whole team at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness for all the hard work they're doing here in August. Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness was founded 45 years ago with a mission to protect, preserve, and restore the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness and the wilderness character of the broader Quetico Superior ecosystem. And today we achieve that mission through 3 program areas that focus on wilderness, people, and community. And for the wilderness, we have policies and program and efforts that focus on protecting the land and water of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. For people, we have a No Boundaries to the Boundary Waters education program that connects diverse students of all backgrounds to the wilderness through classroom education, online programs, and scholarships for wilderness canoe trips. And then finally, for community, we have a community coordinator based here in Ely, but works throughout the entire wilderness, the North Shore and the Gunflint Trail. We recognize that in order for the wilderness to be protected, the gateway communities must prosper. And most of all, at the end, I want to thank all of you that are on this program this afternoon, that just as people need the wilderness needs people. So the fact that you're on this program today is incredibly gratifying to me personally, but to our whole team at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. And it's great to see so many people that care so much about the wilderness. A couple of household items before we begin this program. There's a chat function at the bottom where you can add comments, and a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen there for you to ask questions. This program will last about 35-40 minutes, followed by about 10 to 15 minutes of questions, and we'll close up the program by 1 o'clock here. So the purpose of this program today is to provide the most current, up-to-date information on the wildfires that are within the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness and the other areas of the Superior National Forest, and to place that information in a real context so that we understand the scope of it, but that we're not alarmist, so that we really understand it, and then to prompt some questions and answers as to what you can do to help on all this. So we'll now begin with the program here, and we'll start with sort of an overview of where we're at now. And we'll have Joanna Gilkeson, and we'll have Ann Schwaller kind of give us a sense of setting the stage for us where the fire season has been here. So please begin, Joanna here.
Sure. So can you hear me? Okay, I see a thumbs up from Chris. So again, I'm Joanna Gilkeson. I am I have a call coming in to wherever I am in the hotel. Can I just Hopefully it's not too distracting. So again, I'm Joanna Gilkeson. I'm public affairs and public information at the Superior National Forest. I started in January of this year. I'm originally from Minnesota, but started with the Superior in January, and man, it has been a year. Everyone tells me it's not usually this crazy, so I hope they're right. So I wanted to provide an overview of what we've been seeing over the last year here on the forest and in the wilderness. So this map shows you our current closure areas. So obviously the entire wilderness is closed right now. We have a small closure in place along the Upper Gunflint Trail. And then we also have a pretty large closure in place, you can see on the map, for the Greenwood fire down near Isabella. We also have had, we've had a really long fire season this year. As you all know, this landscape needs fire to thrive, and it needs some amount of burning, and the wildlife depend on it. But we've just had a really active season. So you can kind of get a feel. I know the map is really small, but you can kind of get a feel for all the fires that we've had. These are sort of the major fires. The little orange fires are the ones that are they were large fires, but they're contained. And then all the red fires are the active fires. So there's quite a few fires in Canada near the border, which you've all heard about. And then we have a number of small to sort of medium-sized fires in the wilderness. And then of course the Greenwood fire, which we'll be talking more about later today. The season hasn't gone on for a long time, and we keep getting asked about fatigue of firefighters and employees. And I can kind of guarantee that, yes, we are getting fatigued, but we're doing our best to hang in there with all of you and respond to these fires and try to keep all of our visitors safe. So, the other compounding factor that I just wanted to mention, and yeah, I think you can go to the next slide for this one, but it's drought. It's the drought that Minnesota is seeing this year, which is just severe to extreme across the forest. And so I added this photo. It's not the best photo, but it kind of shows you just how brown the grass is and how the leaves in the trees are changing color. So that's actually our Cowish Ranger District. That's the district office location in Ely, and the leaves are changing color. We shouldn't be seeing that for another couple weeks at least. The grass is just brown and dead, and it's just an indication of how stressed the landscape is, how stressed our vegetation is, how dry it is, the fact that we're seeing these things start to turn color already, or you probably, if you've been out there, you've seen the ferns starting to die back, you've seen the moss be very dry and crispy, and so this is just a huge reason that we're seeing so much active fire. We've had a lot of lightning, we've had a lot of storms bring lightning in, but not a lot of rain, and that lightning will, it'll just strike, it'll sit in where it is. The heat is, in a tree or a stump, or just in the duff, and with the right wind and the right conditions, it'll spark a fire. And we can see that, we can see the lightning just hiding in the landscape, and then it'll pop up and show itself as a fire, days later. And so that's what we're seeing. And so every time we have a storm roll through, we're like, oh no, hopefully we won't get a lot of lightning with this storm. The lightning is coming, but the rain's not. And that's causing a lot of the fires to happen on the landscape. We've had a couple caused by illegal campfires, because we do have a campfire ban in place right now. And so a couple of the fires have been started by illegal campfires, but a lot of them are lightning caused right now, due to just the drought and the vegetation just being really ready to catch on fire. I did see a question just pop up in the chat, the time frame. So I'm giving I don't know if that was the time frame for this presentation or the time frame for what I'm talking about, but the time frame for what I'm talking about is just the season, the overall season of what we're seeing in northern Minnesota on the Superior. So with that, I will, I don't know if Anne, you have anything to add about the condition of the wilderness, or, anything else we're seeing sort of for the big picture before we dive into more of the specific fires that we're dealing with at the moment.
Sure. It's not like fire is unusual. Like you said, it's a normal part of our landscape here, and it's a normal part of the ecology. It's just the length of our fire season, which is unusual. I've been here for about 16 years, and usually fire season does not start at the end of May. So that's been one of the biggest differences. But, like you said, the extreme drought, the high temperatures, the lack of rain, lack of fire staff, and lack of resources has made it a little bit more difficult. But, we've had large fires, like you all know. We had the Cavity Lake, we've had Ham, we've had Pagami, a whole smattering of fires. And some of them burned really well and were really beneficial to the wilderness. And some we had to suppress, and that's kind of the usual every season. Suppression always comes at a certain time, depending on the weather. But for wilderness, it's a little bit different inside wilderness compared to outside. We're supposed to allow some lightning-caused fires to play their natural role, but again, this year, it's not possible. The risk is too high, and our main concern is always safety. So, yeah, I think you did a good job covering that. Thanks, Joanna.
Great, thank you, Ann. Thank you, Joanna here. And maybe Claire, from your perspective, at the end of the Sawbill Trail there, what were you seeing this winter and early spring, as sort of a prelude to the fire season here?
Yeah, we had a really mild winter up here. We live up here at the end of the Sawbill Trail. We're 24 miles north of Tofty, so right on the edge of the wilderness area. And I think we had to plow our property 3 times last winter total, which is really unusual. We usually plow like 3 times a week. So it's been a very low snow year. Last summer was quite dry as well in terms of precipitation. So it's just been a lot of compounding factors. It's been really dry for a really long time. And now, gosh, the forest around my backyard, it looks like if you were to take a black tarp and lay it over your lawn or something and to like prep a garden space and you pull it back months later and everything underneath is sort of dead and gone. That's like what the forest floor looks like around my house right now. So it's pretty dramatic.
Thank you, Claire. So we had a very dry winter and dry spring, setting the stage for all this. So now moving into sort of the logistics of how to fight a fire, Clark, why don't you lead us through that discussion of how folks are fighting the fire?
All right, so a little bit more background on me. I come from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. My day job, I'm actually titled as a contaminant specialist. And what that means is my job is ecological restoration. So I work on large landscape restorations that have been impacted by legacy contaminants. So one of the cases I work on, in fact, is the 2010 Enbridge spill on the Kalamazoo River. So fairly challenging, but my other job as a collateral duty firefighter is probably the one I enjoy the most. So I've been 20 years a wildland firefighter. I was on a hand crew in Idaho long ago. I walked over and asked the information officer if she needed help, and my life changed thereafter. So I've been a fire information officer for about 20 years. And this year I am the lead information officer for one of 2 teams in the eastern area. We have 2 type 2 incident management teams. And in terms of the logistics of fighting fires, particularly when a type 2 team comes in. And let me explain just a little bit about that, because we characterize all our resources in terms of type. So a type 3 team would be your local firefighting team. And on the John Ek and Welt right now, we have type 3 local incident management team. And here on the Greenwood fire, we started back August 15th. A local type 3 team was managing that fire. You go to a type 2 organization, essentially when the capacity of the local resources, their capacity has been reached and they need additional resources. And so an agency can request a type 2 team, and a type 2 team is drawn from a region. In the case of the eastern area, we're a 20-state region. Wildland fire professionals from different state agencies, different federal agencies come together as a single team. We form that team early in the season, and then we make ourselves available national to respond to not just wildland fires, but things like floods, hurricanes, all hazards. Most of the time, it's wildland fire. So we got the call, we responded. This is our third fire that we've been on this year. And when a type 2 team hits the ground somewhere, one of the values of bringing an incident management team organization to the ground is that we can begin to call upon additional resources nationally. So for example, on this fire, we can pull hand crews from as far away as Georgia, Colorado, South Dakota. We have a crew from Wyoming. We have our own type 1 team, the Medewin Hotshots out of Illinois. They're on this fire as well. So the incident management team comes in. We sort of immediately hit the ground doing assessment of the fire. And then we began to assemble the resources we need. And in essence, what we do is build a small community within a community that's been impacted by fire. So we have our own finance section, our own logistics section, our own operations section, our own planning section. And then we have what's called an incident command structure that manages all the pieces and parts. Our logistics folks are responsible for getting everything we need, and that includes facilities on the ground, finding food for firefighters, finding some place, for example, how do you keep a firefighter clean in the age of COVID? So we have to find showers, we have to put those procedures in place. We often need to acquire additional vehicles. We've got to begin to immediately coordinate with local resources. So in this case, we called upon the abilities of 40 to 45 volunteer fire departments within the region. They've contributed to our effort. So it is an amazing job of coordination, ramping up, building a structure that's flexible, it's expandable, it can contract as needed, but meets all those needs, tracks every dime in terms of finance. And then daily in our planning section, we actually build a new plan, new strategy, new tactics. We build a new plan every day. We call that our IAP, Incident Action Plan. And that plan goes to our operations section, and their job is to put that plan on the ground. So finance tracks everything we spend, every dime. Our logistics section gets us everything we need. Our planning section puts the plan together, and our operations section puts it on the ground. Right now, we're at about 481 people on the ground. That includes 8 20-person hand crews from across the nation. We're getting another one from Pennsylvania, I think tomorrow. So close to 9 hand crews right now. We have our own air operations staff that coordinates directly with the Forest Service aviation officer. And right now, I think we have something like 3 Black Hawk helicopters, a Type 2 helicopter, and a Type 3. Back to our typing. Type 1, the largest, Type 2, a medium, Type 3, the smallest. So these large helicopters are really workhorses of the fire aviation corps. So we had a Sikorsky on this last fire I was on, and that has a capacity of about 20,000 gallons. It can fill in about 45 seconds. So the idea is to get the horsepower you need to get the job done. So that's a quick overview of sort of the logistics of fighting fires. Takes a good, solid organization where we have very deliberate lines of communication, channels of command. So in terms of an update on the Greenwood fire, and Joanna gave you a great sort of picture of how these things start in terms of lightning hitting the duff, smoldering, popping up when weather conditions sort of push it. And that was the case on the Greenwood fire. So August 15th, the lightning strike, that probably sat in the duff for a couple of days. And then when the conditions presented themselves, this thing jumped up and began to burn. So right now, we are at about 26,000 acres. And this, the slide that you're seeing now is the perimeter. And I probably don't have control of the cursor, so I probably can't walk you around the map. I'm going to have to do the best I can to give you an idea of where we are. So to orient yourself, you see Highway 2, that north-south corridor, and then Highway 1, yeah, thank you. So Highway 1 going across the northern flank of the fire. There's of course, everyone's aware we had that big push on Monday that we had winds out of the west, pushed the fire to the east. Last Friday, we had a push that came out of the southeast and pushed the fire to the northwest. Now you can't see the finger of that push anymore because we've been doing work in that area. And then a couple of days ago, we had winds out of the northwest, and that pushed that very bottom finger to the south, pushed the fire, yeah, exactly, pushed the fire to the southeast. So let me give you an idea of our sort of operational status right now. So 2 days ago, and maybe I'll back up just a second. So what we like to do is identify what we call our primary containment lines. And those are the lines off which we're going to work. Our goal is to use those primary containment lines as a starting point. And then typically what we do is try to add black to that primary containment line. So our job is to build black line, and then the job after that is to build cold, hard black line. So think about Highway 2 as a primary containment line. Think about Highway 1 as a primary containment line. So over the last 3 or 4 days, we've had a lot of crews. And in the case of Highway 1, we put logging equipment in there, building what we call a shaded fuel break. So they were actually removing trees along Highway 1 to decrease the density of fuels in that area. Same thing along Highway 2 in cases. And then you see that departure in the northwest. We go west of Highway 2. We built a dozer line around that push, tied into Jackpot Road, brought that over to Highway 1. So 2 days ago, we had those winds that came out of the northwest. That would push the fire to the southeast. And we implemented what we call a tactical firing operation. So from the very southern point along Highway 2, we actually put fire on the landscape, going up north up Highway 2, rounding the corner on that dozer line, following Jackpot Road, and then turning east on Highway 1 and bringing fire all the way down Highway 1 to right about there at the present moment. So whoever's running the cursor, you're doing a great job. So putting fire on the landscape right next to that containment line. Think about what's happening with the northwest wind. We've got the tactical advantage in this case. We're using the wind to push the fire we put on the landscape back into the existing footprint of the fire. And doing so, we're able to remove additional fuels between our primary containment line and the existing perimeter of the fire. The idea is to create black space that the fire can't walk through, can't creep through. Now, crews are back in there today and will be back in there tomorrow, and they're hammering that area where we laid down our own fire. So we'll have hand crews walking that area of the burn, hunting hot spots, tamping them down, putting them out, trying to create what we call cold hard black. And typically off our primary containment line, so off Highway 2, we go 50 feet in and then go straight north, carrying that 50 feet all the way around the perimeter of the fire, all the way around Highway 1, where we implemented that tactical firing operation. And just the idea is we progressively do that. Start with a primary containment line, get ourselves 50 feet of black, go in another 50 feet, go in another 50 feet. And so over the course of the next week, we will continue to do that. Now, when we get something like 50 feet of cold hard black in a section, and we're confident it's capable of holding a fire that wants to walk through there, then we begin to paint the perimeter of the fire black, and we begin to calculate a percentage of containment. So think about what's happening on the landscape right now in terms of weather. We've got cooler temps, we've got cloud cover, and we've got higher relative humidities. Those things work to moderate fire behavior. And in cases like that, we can get firefighters directly on the line. And that's just another term I'll explain maybe a little bit more: direct and indirect tactics. Under conditions like these, we can put firefighters right on the perimeter, do it safely, and that is a direct tactic. In the case where we've got not such favorable conditions and we have to pull firefighters back from the line, we may build a second line and light something off to burn things. We call that indirect. They're working away from the perimeter of the fire. The conditions are such right now that we can get firefighters on the line, go direct, and that it affords us the opportunity to get a lot of things done. So right now, a lot of boots on the ground, a lot of heavy equipment, and the forecast is getting a significant amount of work done today and tomorrow. And the perspective is, we've got great weather. We've got great weather, had great weather yesterday, great weather today. We're going to have great weather tomorrow. And then we've got a change in the forecast. So we've got another weather system coming in sometime Sunday. Definitely going to feel that weather system on Monday, and that will test our efforts. And so we have an additional bunch of crews that are working further east on Highway 1. So as Highway 1 goes south there and then goes east again, we are going to tie into the Stony River grade that comes down, and I don't see it, it's not on this map, unfortunately, but it extends to the southwest, and that will become our primary eastern containment line. So we actually have crews in there today beginning to widen that, improve that, so that we can get access in there and build a primary containment line on the eastern flank of the fire. And then as we get down here, we still got crews in the south that are working to reestablish a southern containment line. And you guys probably know better than I what the condition of the landscape is down there in terms of interspaced wetlands, ridges, lakes. And so that's a bit of a challenge in terms of access. And this in fire, that's been one of the logistical challenges, is just getting access to the places we need to go. A great example of that is thinking about in the Northwest along that Jackpot Road. Not a lot of access in that sort of bowl-shaped area in the Northwest. So when we laid down the tactical firing operation 2 days ago, we actually did it by helicopter. So that was wonderfully efficient. It minimized the risk to firefighters that we didn't want to put on the landscape with minimal access. And conversely, Highway 2, Highway 1, great access. We could put firefighters on the ground there now. So a lot of pieces and parts moving across the landscape. One of the take-home messages is we've already got a substantial amount of work done on this western flank, substantial amount of work done along Highway 1, We're bringing that work to the east now, and then dropping down to the southwest on the Stony River grade. So from the incident management team, our hope is that we get a lot of work done this weekend, because we know we're going to get tested Monday with a change in the weather. So Monday, it's going to be warmer, it's going to be drier, it's going to be windy. So we're hoping to get all the pieces and parts put together so that we can make it through that fire weather day. That's probably a good brief overview. And here, great pictures. This one picture of fire, this is actually part of that tactical firing operation that we lit off along the Highway 2 corridor. This other slide I want to point out in terms of commenting about access. You see this tractor-like beast on the side of the road, and that actually is what is known as a marsh master. So think about all our marsh areas, wetlands. We use this specialized piece of equipment, and it's actually a fire engine as well. So it carries its own tank of water. It's got its own hoses, just like any other fire engine, but we can put that into wetland areas. It's relatively minimal impact, wide track vehicle. It can go where others cannot. So specialized equipment. Now I'll back up just a second and talk about what Joanna and Ann commented on. I've got a great video of the Georgia hand crew walking through what should be a spruce bog. And what it really looks like is a hay field in October, because everything is brown, everything is crispy, all the sedges look dead. So their comments about the condition of the landscape are absolutely correct. And go back to the slide for the map for just a second, and look at this southernmost extension, that finger that comes down. We had a good line that went east-west on the southern flank, and that was meant to be our anchor. And from that anchor, we would extend both going north on the east and west sides of the fire. And what actually happened there, we had crossed, some of that line crossed the areas of peat bog, and the fire actually went under our containment line, popped back up. The weather conditions were such, it got hit by winds, it was hot and dry, and that finger pushed out. So another sort of just some pieces of information that give you an idea what the condition of the landscape really is. So that's probably a good summary, I think. There we go. More of our tactical firing operation on the left side of your screen. And then this picture on the right is actually the picture of the fire taking off on Monday, when we had that really severe critical fire weather event. And what happens, we actually had the formation of a pyrocumulus cloud. That cloud shoots vertically into the atmosphere, is capable of creating its own weather, and in this case it did. And so with this pyrocumulus cloud actually laid down lightning of its own, and when the force of that cloud, as it extends vertically through the atmosphere, it actually begins to act something like a vacuum. It picks materials, burning materials, up off the forest floor, shoots them vertically through the cloud, and then out the top of the cloud with the direction of the prevailing winds. And that's how we got the spotting events that affected the McDougal Lake area. So this cloud threw burning embers and materials out a quarter, half mile, a mile, as this event sort of unfolded. Number next. There's our Marsh Master again. This particular machine actually came off the Saney National Wildlife Refuge in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I just happen to work with these guys occasionally. Really good, experienced folks. And so you can see they're actually in the McDougal Lake area, and this was part of a tactical burn that we were initiating in the McDougal Lake area. And unfortunately, that severe fire event really beat us to the landscape. Unfortunately, we were not able to get some of that work done that we had hoped to do to more completely protect that area. And then, of course, you see the event, that pyrocumulus cloud moving across the landscape in this other slide here. So with that, Joanna, I'll let you, I'll just, for everyone on the presentation, just to let you know, the Eastern Area Incident Management Team yesterday accepted the John Ek and the Welt fires. And so the Eastern Area Incident Management Team now is bringing them in under our jurisdiction to manage. And so they'll become part of our portfolio in terms of managing fire on the landscape. And what that means now is that we'll be able to more effectively share resources across those fires as they're needed. And with that, Joanna, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Clark. So I'll just provide a little bit. I know there were a couple of questions in the chat about the John Ek and Welt fires and the impacts to the Gunflint Trail area and the closures on that side of the forest. So just a little bit of an overview. The John Ek fire is still around 1,500 acres. It's a little bit more than that, but just around 1,500 acres. And it grew significantly. Now I'm losing track of my days. I've worked a lot of days in a row. It was at Sunday that we had the big push. And so that fire grew, in one day from 3 acres to 800 acres and then 800 to 1,500 about. So it just shows you how much these fires can grow in a day, given the right conditions, given the wind, given the high temperatures. And so, that's one reason for informing the closure of the boundary waters, is that just without having more rain, with this vegetation being so stressed as it is, the fires can just kind of take off in a day or two. And so it takes a lot of resources to monitor those fires, to drop water on those fires. And it actually, if we had people in there and we needed to conduct search and rescues, it actually diverts resources away from fighting the fire and dropping water on the fire from the air. So the John Ek fire, we haven't been able to put firefighters in there yet due to lack of resources. So without having any established travel routes in and out, it's a very remote area of the wilderness. Without having travel routes, without having enough aircraft to evacuate them in case something were to happen, it hasn't been safe to put firefighters in. Today, there will be a crew. We have been able to acquire some additional resources. As Clark mentioned, that the type 2 team that he talked about is now taking over command of these fires, and it's given the forest and the team an ability to get additional resources. So we will be inserting some firefighters today on the John Ek fire to do some reconnaissance, to look for potential safety zones, to look for routes in, to figure out where they'd be able to camp if we do send firefighters into that for an extended period of time. We did insert a crew for the Welt fire, which remains around 50 acres. And that's the one I believe that's closest to Sawbill Lake and to Clare there by the Sawbill Trail. So we have these are the 2 kind of more major fires. There's a couple other smaller fires that we're monitoring in the wilderness, but these are the 2 that have seen the most growth recently, and that we've been unable to really work towards suppression because we haven't had the resources to insert firefighters safely. Yes, so the Welt fire is, so they're showing the Welt fire right there. And the John Ek fire is, based on however the winds where they come from. That was the one that the other day was moving northeast, and was the reason for the closure of the Gunflint Trail area. Again, that's only forest lands, so it doesn't impact private lands. It doesn't impact county roads, but it does impact forest managed lands and campgrounds along the Gunflint Trail. I think that's all I wanted to share on that one at this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanna. Here are a couple of images of those fires. I want to turn to the human impact of the fires and turn to you, Claire, to discuss that topic here. So, how has the fire impacted your outfitting operation here?
Yeah, it's basically shut us down. So the morning that we got the phone call from the Forest Service saying, stop issuing permits, we're closing the entry points. I mean, I was standing in my office here looking out the window at dozens of people lined up outside there to pick up their permits. And so it was a very immediate shut off, where it was like, okay, we need to go notify people like right now. And so there were some groups that got kind of caught in the crosshairs there in the first day or two after the closure happened. So that was really tricky for a lot of our visitors and for our staff here. So it was crazy. It's like a valve has been turned off. We went from just being totally busy. I have about 200 canoes in my fleet. Almost all of them were rented and out. Our canoe racks were empty. And in the space of about, 36 hours, all of our canoes are back on the rack. There's nobody here. The parking lot is empty. And our phones are ringing off the hook. So it was a really sudden turn of events for the business. And it's a little bit eerie to be up here in these, beautiful 80-degree August days, and we would normally have hundreds of people, sharing them with us. And now it's just really, really quiet.
Obviously it's a hugely, the contrast is disorienting, isn't it? Going from that busyness to nothing, and to have this air of uncertainty out there, Claire. People are asking sort of what they can do, and maybe looking at this topic in the short term and the long term. What can people do when they ask that question to be of help?
Yeah, I get that question a lot right now. So, at the moment, the wonderful thing is the first question people ask is if we're okay and if we're safe. And the answer is yes. So the Welt fire is knocking on the door. It's 4 miles away, but it's we're not under an evacuation order or even a pre-evacuation order. So, currently we're safe. We're working really hard to continue firewising our property. We've got a robust sprinkler system. So really the biggest issue for us and for many other outfitters right now is just the financial hit. We're seasonal. We're only open in the paddling season, and August is the big month. That's when outfitters make their money. We spend a lot of the early part of the season paying off our canoes that we buy every year, paying off all the gear that we've bought. A lot of us have payroll that we need to make. We've got staff on site. Everybody staffs up for August because it's the big time. And then August is your moneymaker month. That's when you try to make a profit to live on throughout the rest of the winter. So every single outfitter across the board right now is losing out on that. Some more than others, but it's certainly a hard effect. So there's sort of two things that you can do. The first is in the short term right now, a lot of outfitters have like online stores. People are starting to sell merch on their online store. A lot of us are going to start our used canoe sales earlier than we normally would. Normally I wouldn't sell canoes till October because they'd be rented, but they're not rented right now. So we're going to start selling them, this week. And a lot of other outfitters are doing that as well. So any sort of like financial support at this point, people are just trying to make payroll. We're just trying to keep people on staff. So any deposit that gets forfeited is going straight to that effort for most of us. And then, in the long term, this is sort of a thing that we have to think about in terms of building resiliency within our businesses for the inevitable impacts of climate change. We're not exempt from that here. Northern Minnesota is usually the last to get a lot of things. We joke about that up here in Cook County. Like, we're the last ones to get the latest fashions. We were the last ones to be affected by COVID cases, but we are not going to be the last ones to feel the effects of climate change. That's just not how that works. So, looking to the future, I encourage people to be in touch with your Congress people, your representatives. push for better funding for wildland firefighters, for federal firefighters, push for more resources. It's frustrating to have things shut down because the resources aren't there to fight it. It's frustrating to know that these people, that are working on the forest, everybody else on this call that has the knowledge, has the skills, has the plan in place to fight these fires, and then they can't do it because they're lacking some resource. That's frustrating. So pushing for that for the future would be helpful, to help build in that resiliency for our businesses in our area to be able to deal with these conditions as they come, because they'll continue to come.
Thank you for those comments. Your comments are really insightful on a couple different levels. There are obviously the short-term things that can be done, Claire, but in a sense they're band-aids if there are these sort of systemic issues that are out there with climate change not being addressed and having federal government agencies starve for financial resources. So those sort of systemic things that are out there, and for the many hundreds of people that are on the line right now, there is going to be a special legislative session in Minnesota to provide relief for drought-stricken farmers. And one thought we've considered is whether we should, they're including in that effort should be an effort to help outfitters that have been impacted by the fires. And so trying to, again, that's a little bit of a Band-Aid, but until we can heal the wound, these Band-Aids are important. And I looking at how farmers are affected by climate change, we also see how outfitters such as Clare are affected by this as well. And during this, the money-making month, as Clare referred to August, how they're really shut down here. So I want to encourage this discussion with everyone that's on the line here and among our panelists, how we can be perhaps of help when there's a special legislative session coming up in just a couple of weeks here in Minnesota, as well, to be of direct financial assistance. So for people who are very, very affected here, we've had a lot of questions on here, and it kind of points to perhaps the wisdom of having further discussions about this. But let's try to address some of these right now. And I know that people are kind of wondering about a number of sort of practical questions about if someone has a permit for, in the upcoming weeks here in September. What should people do? What should people do right now? And let's, from both the Superior National Forest and Clare's, and what should they do? So I throw it out to the panelists there to respond to that sort of practical question for people who have permits and coming up here in a couple weeks or so. So Joanna, do you want to start the answer to that question?
Yeah, I'd love to say a specific date and when we know what's going to happen and when, but all I can tell you is to keep checking back. I put our website address in the chat there that'll show all of that. We keep reevaluating every few days. It's the best we can do based on the conditions and the weather and the wind changes, which are constant. So all I can tell you is to check back with your outfitter or your guide as well.
Thanks, Ann. Clare?
Yeah, we're certainly, I'm posting on the Sawbill newsletter at sawbill.com anytime we get any sort of official news. I try not to post things until we get like an actual forest order or actual word from the forest. So we're not posting anything from the rumor mill. It's only stuff that we know is official. And we'll post about, things that are happening like on the ground here, like air quality, what is currently closed, what's available, other options in the area. And then, certainly as we hear about those closures, we're contacting customers and letting people know. So at this point, it's very much like hurry up and wait. But if you have the vacation days and you have the time off and you want to salvage some sort of camping trip or fishing trip, certainly call any outfitter that's in the area that you're shooting for, and they will be able to advise about places to go and things that you could still do on the forest.
And if not here, there's so many other recreational opportunities in the area.
Great, thanks. So, sometimes the answer is difficult, that you need to stay on top of the information, and that there are, the people at the Superior National Forest and the outfitters, it's a day by day sort of thing. And so it's a really, we all just need to stay up to date as much as we can by reaching out for information. And, Anne, you just raised a good point, and Claire, you alluded to it as well, is that looking at recreational opportunities outside the wilderness area itself. And there are a lot of beautiful lakes to visit as well. And Anne, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, there are hundreds of campsites outside the boundary waters, and I think people forget about that. Hundreds of lakes as well. Right now, the drought affects the entire forest, but there's also voyageurs, there's state parks, there's state forests, there's the Apostles, Isle Royale. There's a lot of locations. When the border opens back up, Quetico will be open. But the boundary waters is a favorite for a lot of people, and I can understand why. I did want to answer a question really quickly that's in the chat about firefighting activities being wilderness compatible. I just want to quickly say that we have resource advisors on almost all of our fires, and they look at all kinds of things. They look at impacts to visual, historic resources, botanic, aquatic, fish, wildlife, recreational, and other kind of values of wilderness. And they also make sure that we're using minimum impact suppression tactics, which looks at everything like our use of motorized and mechanized equipment, fire line construction, say near water, look at camps, how firefighters are dealing with human waste and long-term use and food storage, pump sites, water sources, safety zones, all of that. So yes, by law, we have to employ NIST tactics in wilderness.
So let me follow up with Anne's comment and just say right on the mark. And so we have those resource advisors now integrated into the incident management team. And think about what we're doing on the landscape. Unfortunately, we've got really substantial resources at risk on the Greenwood fire. So several small communities that circle the fire. And so we've had to use some pretty aggressive tactics in places, which means, for example, putting dozers on the landscape. Now, that resource advisor, one of his principal jobs is to help us develop a plan to rehabilitate the land once the fire has been contained. So we actually go back in, build that plan, and start that rehabilitation process once the fire is contained. And that's part of our responsibilities as well. So thanks, Anne, for picking that up.
Great, thank you so much, Clark, for that additional insight into the restoration component to the work that's being done out there. There is, it's so humbling and overwhelming to look at all the hard work that's being done to address the fire and to think about the need to address climate change in the larger context, so that that we don't have to deal with these continued extended fire seasons. And I know there are a lot of questions that remain out there, and questions about additional fires as well. And for everyone on the line here, it's we want to be a public service to all of you, and we're grateful for the public servants and Claire that have been on the line here with us sharing their time. We'll try to keep doing this to keep you informed in what's going on. I know this is of real information that's important to you and real world plans here. And so we will do that. And Maya, if you'd please share the last slide for a moment here about the annual gathering here. And I know that we've been receiving some questions about, we typically have an annual dinner, an in-person dinner to create community and bring people together to celebrate the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. We cannot do that this year. The Delta variant simply does not allow us to bring a couple hundred people or more together to celebrate safely. So we are pivoting and we are making a virtual event, and we are going to make this fun and compelling and create community and celebrate. And here's some information for you. It is, you can go to our website or you can reach out to any of the staff members here. about that. So we are encouraging people to become sponsors for the event, and you can contact me about that, or contact again any of our staff, or go to our website about that. And we will have compelling content, perhaps compelling content about the putting the fire in context, both the short term and long term. Please take that down, Maya, here. And so for everyone out there, you are the key to the future. We are not just leaves blowing in the wind, that we have some agency here. And as Claire was talking about, we need to let our public officials know that important public policies are at stake here, and that northeastern Minnesota will not be the last one to climate change. That this is we're very much at a dividing line where climate change is having a very real impact now, and in 2021 is reflecting that. So thank you, Anne, thank you, Clark, thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Claire, for being part of this today, and thank you everyone out there as well. The people need the wilderness, and the wilderness needs people. So thank you so very much this afternoon. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.